Well, previews are actually one of the most important things for me as a director, because I begin to see how the story plays against the audience and how their reactions. There's the obvious thing, whether jokes land and whether they laugh or not, and also what they're laughing at. And sometimes it can be laughing at things that aren't meant to be laughed at, and you want to play with that a little bit. So earlier in my early previews, I had in the court scene put in Havana Gila with Gratiano singing it as a mocking thing to Shylock once he's defeated in the court. And the audience laughed there, and there was a little press on it, and I looked at it and I thought, this is maybe just the wrong thing at this time in the play. And I decided to just change it a bit. The audience also laughs when Gratiano says a second Daniel. And because Shylock has claimed that Portia, the clerk, the lawyer, is a Daniel, and then when he gets his comeuppance, Gratiano says a second Daniel. So they laughed at that, and then he says a Daniel Jew, and he spits on him, and he actually take the laugh that's slightly anti-Semitical, not really, but more laughing at the character, and spinning it, so that you see the double side of the coin. At one point you see them laughing at this, and at the same time realizing there's consequences to this kind of laughter. Obviously, Merchant's a very dark play. It's a comedy still, though. It's just a dark comedy, and you're playing with deep, inner, subconscious emotions that come out. And so playing that in front of an audience in a preview is to try and see how to bring that out, how to play with that, and how to turn on its head. It's sort of like what I did at the very end of the piece. And watching it register. In the first preview, I was very happy that it registered. There's a kind of the portion of Bassanio start undressing on stage. It's very sexy, it's very funny. They suddenly realize they're in public, and so they run off. Good laugh. And then Antonio begins to exit alone, and the character of Jessica, Shylock's daughter, is left on stage, and she begins to recite a prayer where she asks, in the Jewish prayer, it's a prayer of forgiveness for committing sins against a father. And it kind of turns on its head. And that's what I've been trying to play in the play, and that's what previews are so good for, is that you're on this side, and then you're on that side, and playing the contradictions. And so previews are fantastic for examining where that lands. Sure, all the time. I mean, King Lear was here is extraordinarily altered. Lots was cut in it. I've cut a little bit, and things that really deal with clarification, like things that are, I'm not a great cutter of Shakespeare, I don't really like to do that. I will alter some words, but I cut a little bit because it's just referential to events or circumstances or current events in Shakespeare's time that the audience wouldn't get. Some language that is simply too obscure for the audience to understand. But not too much immersion. There is a line that Portia says. She uses the word complexion, and it's used 3 times in the play. At the beginning, she's announced, in the first scene she has, she's told that the Prince of Morocco is coming, and she makes a racist remark. She says, if anybody of that complexion come near me, I hope they shrive me, which means confess me rather than wive me. So she's making a judgment, a prejudgment. The play's about prejudice, in my opinion. And she makes this prejudgment of this guy she's never met, based alone on his skin color. The first thing the Prince of Morocco says on his arrival is, "Mislike me not for my complexion." He knows he's going to walk into a prejudged sense. So given the bravado of that character and the brassiness of him, he walks right in and says, "Don't judge me by my skin color." The contemporary translation. And he's a very sexy Prince of Morocco. Portia falls for him. Portia doesn't want him to take the test right away because she wants to at least have supper with him and get to know him. At the end, upon his leaving, after he fails by choosing the golden casket, and as he chooses the casket, he reveals his identity to her. And that's what all the casket choosing ceremony is, and what the test of the casket is watching these suitors reveal their identity. At the end of that scene, she says, "Let all of his complexion choose me so." Now, the word complexion has 2 meanings. It means skin color, but also means temperament and disposition. And it's my feeling that as a young woman stepping out into the world, she's learning the second meaning of complexion, in a sense that she's understood his character. And she didn't like him as a person once she had met him, once she had experienced him choosing the casket. And so she takes the second meaning. I've changed that to persuasion because, of course, we're not going to get that today. And I have done that here and there throughout the text, just to make sure that the progression of prejudice and the story of prejudice is clear. Well, I've decided that Shylock is really a guy who's trying to work his way in this Christian society, do his business, not get spat upon, and in some way be recognized or accepted for what he does in a terribly anti-Semitic society. So in fact, I would say he's sort of a secular Jew, for lack of a... He doesn't wear any of the yarmulke, the prayer shawl around his waistband. I'm not sure that's what's called, a prayer shawl. That's kind of a belt. He doesn't wear the pace. He doesn't wear the hat, the traditional hat. He wears a good business suit, an excellent business suit. He's trying to sort of fit into that world and pass by that world and do his business. And over the course of the play, given what they do to him, he becomes more and more fundamentalist. It's the same thing that I've done with Antonio, that he in fact becomes more fundamentalist over the course of the play as a Christian. In a sense, he becomes a guy who sees himself Christ-like, sacrificing himself for his love of Bassanio. You could say that Antonio is a kind of repressed homosexual, and so he becomes a fervent Christian. Shylock loses his daughter and is betrayed, he thinks, by Antonio when they steal his daughter and steal his money, becomes more and more a fervent Jewish believer. And so when we see him after the first and second scene, he is now wearing a yarmulke, he's wearing the talit. He's met on the street, and two of Antonio's boys assault him. They rip the talit off of him. And he then meets his old friend Tubal, who's been looking for his daughter. He finds out his daughter's been spending all his money, that the daughter has sold a ring that Shylock's long-deceased wife gave to him. So he's in a rage, he's in a fury, he's in terrible pain. He picks up the talit, puts it on, and at that moment, at the end of the play, a cantor starts singing from the Jewish religion. That cantor is then pitted against Gregorian chant. And Michael Guerre, the composer, has done this wonderful weave of the cantor and the Gregorian chant fighting each other out to the end. Tubal himself is a much more traditional Jewish person, and he is dressed with the pace and the hat. He is a kind of strong believer, and you see Shylock increasingly become like that. So when Shylock walks into the court, even though he hasn't time to grow a pace, he's wearing the hat and the very long coat, silk coat, in the court scene to make a public statement that he is a Jew. And he's going to have the law stand for him and sort of become much more fundamentalist, if you like. And it seems to me in the play that these people in their prejudgment and in their increasing hatred and desire for revenge upon each other, whether that's the revenge of sacrifice on the part of Antonio's part, or martyrdom, or Shylock's desire for revenge, they become progressively fundamentalist.